to First Things First. I'm Sarah Kustok, filling in for Jenna Wolfe. That's the Hall of Famer. Chris Carter. That's Nick Wright. How you guys doing this
morning? Good morning.
Good?
We're doing great. Thank you for stepping in once again.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Thanks. Long week with me here for you guys.
Show doesn't miss a beat.
We got a big show today. Vince Goodwill will join us to discuss his bombshell reports on the Rockets' turmoil. The Lakers are trying to land a third star, but we will start with the Celtics.
Oh, will we?
Whew, it's been a rough 24 hours for Boston. For one, Kyrie Irving is not expected to rejoin the team, and all signs seemingly point to him joining the Nets. And to make matters worse, Al Horford is also expected to turn down his player option and seek a multi-year deal elsewhere. So, Nick, what do you make of this Celtics situation?
They squandered the biggest heist in NBA history. They were in a perfect storm of positive situation for them when they had aging superstars, that a desperate team with a desperate owner that happened to be an overbearing Russian oligarch at the time said, we got to win right now. Oh, draft picks. Who cares about draft picks? And they got essentially 5 lightly or unprotected first-round picks for 2 players who were combined 73 years old. And we are now 6 years removed from that moment. And the team on the other side of that heist is in a better position moving forward than Boston. That's where they're at. They have made, since that trade, 3 major free agent or trade moves. Signing Gordon Hayward, that has not gone well. I do not blame them for that, but it has not gone well. Trading for Kyrie Irving, he is walking out that door in 12 days for no compensation. And signing Al Horford, who was the first of those 3 dominoes, who you thought was going to be there long term when he opted out yesterday. The expectation around the league was he's opting out to end up taking a longer-term deal with Boston. Now Al Horford is walking out that door with no compensation. So the Boston Celtics are going to be the dynasty that never was, the championship contender that never was. They will go into next year based around Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Gordon Hayward, Marcus Smart, and maybe Terry Rozier. That is a 40-some-odd win team. I thought they were a 47-win team if they had kept Horford. Celtics fans will tell you he's the most important player on that roster, what he does leadership-wise, defensively, his efficiency offensively, and now he leaves for nothing. And Danny Ainge has to look himself in the mirror and say, how did it get here? How are we in this position now? But that's the position they find themselves in.
Yeah, Kustok, you always talk about going around the league, covering the league, about some of the quality people that are in this league. Forget what their skill level is. Forget that they can switch 1 through 5. Forget that they've been in big-time situations. Forget that they're great in the locker room. Like, he's a great guy. Like, it's hard to replace that. There's no money amount. How many guys do you have to bring in to be able to get the type of leadership, the type of experience that he has, close to championship basketball? After winning a couple of national championships in college, you know what the Celtics look like? 2 years ago, when they decided to sign Gordon Hayward, they're going to bring this team together, trade it for Kyrie Irving. It's as if Al Horford began to age. Kyrie Irving wasn't successful. Either he got hurt or there was just something they didn't like in him. Gordon Hayward went from an all-star player. He never got hurt. And he just got better and better in the last couple of years, like a guy like Paul George or Oladipo. And you know what they're going to do? This is going to be Utah of the East. They're going to build around Gordon Hayward. But we know, we've been alive long enough to know that's not what happened. He had an awful injury. He has not recovered from that injury. But when you look at that team, you talk about the roster as they sit today, I mean, that's what it would have been. I mean, this is the team that Utah would have.
Well, and it's interesting because Al Horford, I mean, think back to when he was coming from Atlanta. He was a free agent. He was one of the most coveted guys in Boston. You look at them, he might be one of their bigger free agent signings that they've had, particularly in quite some time. But it's fascinating. Nick, great point, because anyone you talk to from Boston, anytime I would call their games, he was unequivocally the most important person and the cog on that team that allowed them to go. But I don't know if anyone saw this coming. And to me, the question is, did he see the writing on the wall of what the Boston Celtics are looking like and saying, this isn't necessarily the title contending team anymore that I thought I was coming to. Our future isn't as bright as it once seemed. And so now if these pieces aren't coming, if everything is changing, do I want to still be here?
Or, Nick, did they undervalue his value on the open market?
I think it's a combination of the two. I think they underestimated his value on the open market clearly. The great Mark Stein reported that Al Horford believes he has a 4-year, $100 million deal awaiting him on the first day of free agency. So, of course, he's going to look at 3 years, $65 million, which is what I think the Celtics were getting ready to present to him as saying, no, there's no way I'm taking that. And it is Danny Ainge and the Celtics' job to have the foresight to know that. Just like it is their job to recognize, okay, if things are going sideways with Kyrie Irving, instead of holding on to this false hope that he was actually going to stay, they never even gauged his trade value at the deadline. They at no point did they want to abandon what I think many of us saw was a sinking ship. They held on to that press conference from October as if that was a signed contract.
Nick, even if there was some signs as far as him wanting out or whatever, they had to go beyond the trade deadline. They had to give this team a chance with Kyrie Irving healthy, given how far they went last year without Kyrie Irving and the way the East was shaped up. Like, you had to give that team the opportunity to try to do something together because Gordon Hayward being hurt, Kyrie Irving coming back, they deserved at least a full season together.
So with all signs pointing to him signing elsewhere, where would be a good landing spot for Horford?
Well, listen, a lot of people immediately connected him to the Lakers because him at the 5, Anthony Davis at the 4, LeBron at the 3. Horford doesn't need a lot of touches, can shoot, great defensive player. But at 4, if he's going to be getting $100 million at $25 million a year, the Lakers aren't going to do that. And while I do love the fit, the Lakers need guards, not bigs. The player that's on the Celtics right now that would help the Nets the most, I think, is Al Horford. We have seen how Al Horford gives Joel Embiid more fits than any player in the league. Now, Al Horford is not going to go to Brooklyn to play with Kyrie again, so that's not going to happen. But I think Al Horford knows where he's going. Could it be a team like Dallas that has cap space but don't seem to be connected to any of these max guys? Al Horford clearly has an idea of where he's going, and while the back end of a 4-year, $100 million contract you might be regretting a bit, in the beginning of that deal, he will be of good value to a champion.
And the Celtics, underestimated out there right now, is around 10 teams that have $20 million at least to be able to spend. So someone like Al Horford, he's got great value. And a lot of times, too, if he can't get that championship that he's looking for, man, it's about the money. It's about getting that last big payday. He's had a great basketball career. He'll be a great asset to any other organization. And that's what I see happening here. Them underestimating his ability on the open market because he's a smart guy. Smart guys don't void $30 million.
No.
I mean, at his age.
And, I mean, there are a lot of places he fits. He's such a good player, and he's such a malleable player. He'd be a great fit in Milwaukee if Brook Lopez walking out the door. A great fit and add some veteran leadership. But they would have to move away from some of the guys they want to bring back. And I would assume Milwaukee wants to run back that 61
they're in a tough spot
team.
with the cap where they're at. Well, Boston's not the only team trying to make some decisions coming up. Is Chris Paul demanding a trade?
Okay.
All right, on to the Rockets. According to reports from friend of the show, Vincent Goodwill, Chris Paul has demanded a trade from Houston, and his relationship with James Harden is unsalvageable. Vincent will be here in about 45 minutes to discuss this. As for Chris Paul, he commented on an Instagram post about the trade. News to me, and Rockets GM Daryl Morey denied Chris Paul demanded a trade. Nick, what's your reaction to all of this?
My reaction's multifaceted because this is a very tenuous position for me. Vincent Goodwill is not only a friend of the show.
I yield my time to the senator from Kansas City.
Okay. So he's not only a friend of the show, he's a friend of mine. And it was on my suggestion we started bringing him on the show, and he's done a great job. So I've known Vinny a long time. He is a great reporter. I've also known Daryl a very long time, and I think he's a great GM, and I don't know either one of these people to ever mislead me. I talked to Daryl yesterday. He flatly tells me Chris Paul has not demanded a trade. Vincent Goodwill is clearly hearing what other people have heard. Vinny just got it locked down, which is that Chris Paul did, in fact, demand a trade. At this point where we sit here today, I am confident in this. The Rockets are not going to trade Chris Paul. That the Rockets, if Chris Paul did demand a trade, as Vincent has reported, I think what the Rockets came back to him and told him, I would imagine, I don't know this, Daryl didn't tell me this, he says it never happened, is that, hey, man, there's not a market. 3 years, $120 million for a 34-year-old, 6 foot maybe point guard. That's clearly on the downside. There is not a market. But no matter what, my pal Daryl Morey will say, where I am with Vinny 1,000%, is there is clearly some problems going on in Houston. And maybe I should have paid more attention to how their season ended. Not on the court in Game 6 against the Warriors, but right after that. Chris Paul and James Harden have been doing these press conferences together all postseason. Chris Paul, after that game, gets dressed the fastest he's ever gotten dressed, breaks NBA protocol, does his press conference not only by himself, but before Steve Kerr or Mike D'Antoni even get to do theirs.
I don't think we've ever seen a player do it before the coaches.
You're not supposed to. Right. And it was maybe just to get out of there, maybe because he didn't want to do it next to James Harden. Then when Harden does his press conference by himself, he's asked about what the Rockets need to do to get over the hump. And he says very cryptically, and we can read into what we want, oh, I know exactly what we need to do.
And at the time, we didn't know to read something into it. But when you start going back and you start hearing these things, and we've just been through a really special time, and we've seen a lot of organizations say that there's turmoil, and then people in the organization say, yeah, I know there's nothing there. I'll give you a couple examples. Pittsburgh Steelers. Now Antonio's gone to Oakland. We found out, wow,
how bad it was.
Los Angeles Lakers, Magic Johnson and the young rookies, both of them either in the trade, Magic with Rob Pelinka. We found out afterwards, wow, there was a lot of truth to that. So a lot of time when you start hearing these stories, it's Daryl's job. And I didn't talk to Daryl, but it's his job to tell Nick, no, man, that didn't happen. So I can understand why Chris Paul would be like, oh, no, I didn't demand the trade. Yeah. How could you trade? It'd be almost impossible. Like his contract is untradeable. Him and John Wall have the 2 worst contracts in the NBA. And is there someone willing to reach up their hand and say, Chris Paul, the next 3 years, I'm going to give him $120 million. Like, he's not worth that now, and it's only going to get worse over the next couple years. So there has to be some truth to this.
And in an odd way, Chris Paul actually has more value for the Rockets than for anyone else because they have their starting 5 locked in. That even if personality-wise he and Harden aren't getting along, on the court it works. You know that this team is actually a really good team that could not get through one specific opponent. So the positive side for the Rockets is this. If I describe a team that over the course of a half decade is at or near the top of their conference in the regular season, in the playoffs, keeps running into one opponent and can't get through that one opponent. There is turmoil on the coaching staff. There is potential trade rumors surrounding their second-best player. Who am I describing? The 2019 Houston Rockets or the 2018 Toronto Raptors? The idea is LeBron left, and Golden State is damaged, that there was Dwayne Casey was fired, Mike D'Antoni had guys on his coaching staff removed. Of course, the difference is Kawhi Leonard's not walking through that door for Houston, at least not that we could see a player of his caliber even close to it. But we have seen teams have this type of turmoil right before they break through. The question is, can Chris Paul and James Harden get back on the same page to a degree? Because I get why these guys don't. I get where the rub would be, where the problem would be. For James Harden, he's got to feel like, what do I have to do to earn more respect? I've gotten better every year. I've cut out some of the more, I don't want to say nefarious, but some of the more unhealthy parts of my off-the-court lifestyle. I stay in the gym. I'm a league MVP, almost won it again. When you got hurt, Chris, I carried us with an near NBA record 30-point streak.
Well, what's next is, does he make other players better? Yeah, he's made himself. You said it. I've made myself better. But now in the NBA, he can't take over a game, a playoff series. We've seen that. And this style, it's not that people don't trust Harden. It's all the other things. Are they ever going to be good defensively? Are they going to be good enough to be able to win a championship? And to me, it's not just Golden State. I don't believe in the coach. Their owner don't believe in the coach. That's the reason why they didn't sign him immediately to a contract extension. And that trickles down. When you feel that on the coach, it trickles down to the team. Now they're going to do what they want to do. Chris Paul feels like D'Antoni is not doing his job as far as being on James Harden.
For as much as we're talking, though, about D'Antoni, about style, about Harden and CP3's relationship, how much of this falls on Chris Paul? Because it's not like him and James Harden are the first time that he has butted heads with teammates. There's a track record for his disposition, for his behaviors, for his character, not always getting along, his leadership style not always being one that players can relate to. How much of this is on Chris Paul himself?
Well, that's the flip side to this coin, is to quote our friend Mark Schlereth, and I'll paraphrase it, if everywhere you go it stinks, maybe it's you. And I love Chris Paul as a player, and I know him a very little bit as a guy, and I really like him as off the court as well. But he's braying and abrasive and always in your face. There's the famous clip of when DeAndre Jordan didn't do the putback in LA and he's jumping up and down screaming at him. There's a clip from the Drew League, the damn Drew League, man, the first summer when Chris Paul and James Harden came together. And James Harden took a shot instead of a layup, and after he made it, he's dancing. And in the Drew League, Chris Paul walks up to him and is yelling at him, saying, take the layup. And Harden's like, what are you talking about? It's one thing when you're a top 5 MVP candidate, the point guard, the best point guard in the league, to have that be your leadership style. It's another thing when you are the second, or in the playoffs, the third best player on your own team, to have that same style. It has worn on teammates year after year. So that's where Harden can't be blamed, because he's not the unique factor in this. Like, you have a lot of teammates that, while they appreciate what Chris Paul brings to the table, the way he communicates, the way he conducts himself can wear on people, and that's been throughout his entire career.
Yeah, I don't feel like you're going to get the best of Chris Paul if you continually have him off the ball. And the thing that Harden has strived in, that is not what Chris Paul, that's not how he's going to be an effective leader. Because it's hard to lead unless you're playing well. This year, didn't shoot the ball well, either from 2 or 3-point range. So now we saw he only played 50-something games this year. Man, this is one of the worst years that Chris Paul had. And they said they're just trying to get him to the playoffs healthy. But if he doesn't have the ball in his hand, facilitating, running the offense, making other players better, it's going to be difficult for him. So I don't see this situation as getting better.
It's been a rough 24 hours for Boston. Both Kyrie Irving and Al Horford are expected to leave in free agency. CC, what do you make of the Celtics situation?
Man, this is very confusing. I mean, everything was geared toward this summer, all those picks. Kyrie Irving signed an extension, either try to go out and get Anthony Davis or make some other big splash. Like, I'm totally shocked the way the Boston Celtics team is falling apart. Al Horford, man, there's not a lot of guys in this league I have more respect for on and off the court. Him as a leader, locker room guy, him, the way he's worked on his game to be the type of player that he is. Man, this is shocking news that they couldn't come to some type of agreement.
It is amazing how quickly things can fall apart in the NBA. The Celtics folks would tell you, my pal, Colin Cowherd, said it's going to be the next dynasty in this league. They're going to re-sign Kyrie. He committed to him. They're going to then obviously trade for Anthony Davis. Al Horford's going to be there. Gordon Hayward's already locked in. Look at that big four. Now, AD, you're not even in the game for. Kyrie's walking out the door. Horford's walking out the door with no compensation. And Gordon Hayward appears to be a shell of himself.
And what it proves is you can't listen to a guy that says wide receivers are only the icing on the cake. You can't listen to him. Okay. Oh, my mentor, Colin Cowherd.
Hope you're enjoying your vacation, Colin.
Guy
Miss you, buddy.
Me everything I know.
To the Raptors, Kawhi Leonard celebrated his title at the parade in Toronto on Monday. His old teammate Tony Parker said he was very happy for Kawhi after winning his second title. CC, your thoughts on Parker's comments?
Oh, yeah. Kawhi was 100 times happier than he was for him.
Like Tony Parker's injury was 100 times worse?
Absolutely. Got Popovich and the staff there to talk him into going out to the media, telling him, oh, my injury. I've never even seen an injury that was 100 times worse than another player.
Let him try to mend the fences here. Let him try to extend a hand to the other side and say, hey, Kawhi, maybe things got a little sideways between us, but I'm happy for you. I'm happy. Those guys won a championship together. That's like a blood transfusion. They'll always be brothers.
Man. We was on the same was on the same team, but the way he treated Kawhi and the way he had the public questioning Kawhi's integrity, Kawhi's not hurt.
Make up for it.
Oh, no, ain't no making up for that. There's certain things you can't come back from, Nick.
Well, if that's the case, then Tony Parker might have in his NBA career done 2 of them to teammates. We don't have to talk about the first one.
No,
I'll bring that up.
Let's not. Moving on to the draft. The Pelicans are essentially a lock to take Zion, number 1. And now, according to reports, they're exploring a trade to go up to the number 2 spot to select his Duke teammate, R.J. Barrett. Nick, thoughts on this?
All right, so I read this report, and somehow in my brain, R.J. Barrett's name was Ja Morant's name. Because I thought it was like, oh my God, if the Pelicans could get Zion and trade up for Ja, what an unbelievable haul. And then I was told this morning, I misread the report, I read it again. The idea that you would trade up to number 2 and not take Ja Morant is so ridiculous to me. I can't believe it. David Griffin's too smart for that. It's nothing against R.J. Barrett, but if you're going to try to use the assets that you have, the 4 pick and other things, to move up to number 2, then you get the other can't-miss guy in this draft, Ja Morant. You team him with Zion Williamson, not just because Zion and R.J. were roommates and they played in college together. Not interested. Ja Morant is the guy that has to go number 2, no matter who's taking that, no matter who's picking there.
Yeah, I don't necessarily know about Ja with that pick, but I do believe that the relationship that Zion and RJ have, it could be special if cultivated the right way. Now, I wouldn't go out of my way. I wouldn't pass over Ja. Now, I do have Lonzo, so I do have a point guard. You can only have so many guards on the team. I do believe in the right situation. Maybe it's not the Pelicans, but I know there's other teams that had talked about how special their relationship was.
If you can get to the 2, I would give you Lonzo and the 4 for the opportunity to take Ja Morant at number 2 and walk away with a consensus number 1 and a guy in Ja who would be the number 1 pick in about half of the drafts of the last 20 years.
Finally, good news for Saints wide receiver Michael Thomas. According to reports, New Orleans is ready to make the former second-round pick the highest-paid receiver in the NFL. Since entering the league, he has had at least 90 catches in all 3 seasons. CC, do fans have enough appreciation for Thomas?
No, I don't think so, because even I was wrong on Michael Thomas, man. I didn't think that he would be this good in the league. I was worried about his overall speed. And coming into Ohio State, he came from a military school, originally played his high school football in California, Keyshawn Johnson's nephew. I thought he'd be a decent player at Ohio State. Went on to have a great career there. And from the time he enrolled, the first day until the day he left, you're not going to find, and Urban Meyer said this, you're not going to find a lot of players that improve more than him. He's a guy that's in early, stays late, loves watching film, loves the ugly part about being a football player. He thrives in that as far as getting there, lifting weights, trying to get better in every aspect. So this is a great story for me. Because I had underestimated how good he'd be in the league, but he has some of the most dependable hands. He's become a great route runner because he doesn't have great speed. He doesn't have great athleticism. If you see him at the combine, he might be drafted in the 3rd or 4th round. But as a football player, he is the 1st round. He should be one of the top 5 paid guys that we've had because first 3 years in the league, no one's caught more passes. That right there has proven it in itself, even though he's in a very favorable situation with New Orleans, Sean Payton, and Drew Brees. Very proud of Michael Thomas and how he's developed into one of the great receivers that we have in the game.
And New Orleans, to their credit, while even you, the greatest receiver in Ohio State history, didn't see this coming from your fellow Ohio State alum, New Orleans, after having him in the building, saw enough in him that they were comfortable trading away Brandon Cooks,
yes, great
who was
point.
the more athletic, the guy most people thought had more upside. But I am curious, I'll bring you up a second time in this, he has some similar physical traits that you did in your career, right? You were never the fastest receiver in the league, never the tallest or could jump the highest, but your ability to run very precise routes and your refusal to drop passes, that's where Michael Thomas thrives, right? Are those two
He thrives in contested, but he also thrives in even when I'm covered, I'm open. Because he has very, very strong hands at the point of attack, catches the ball away from his body. Very, very smart, too, where Sean Payton's able to move him around in their system to put him in different spots in the offense. Yes, Michael Thomas and I, very, very similar. He plays outside a little bit more than I did towards the end of my career, but he's been very effective. Red zone, very effective. Third down, very effective. Yes. He deserves that type of payday.
And this is one of those situations where it is a perfect fit for all sides. Drew Brees continues to knock away age and continues to say, I'm going to do exactly what Brady did and set all these records for quarterbacks of my age. But he maybe can do that for 1, 2. Let's give him the full benefit of the doubt, 3 more seasons. What you have with Michael Thomas is a receiver entering his prime who already knows the offense, who already has the rapport with Drew Brees, who has been incredibly productive. Of course the Saints pay Michael Thomas. Of course they pay him maybe not the highest paid receiver in football, but top 5 receiver money because he's a top 5 receiver from a production standpoint. And New Orleans 2 years ago feels like, man, if not for the Minneapolis Miracle, we go to the Super Bowl, we win it. New Orleans feels like last year, if the referees make the damn right call, we go to the Super Bowl, we win it. They've been knocking at the door. You don't want to lose your most productive offensive player. They've done a good job drafting Michael Thomas, drafting Alvin Kamara, giving Drew Brees some weapons and some options in that offense so it's not just Drew Brees throw the ball 600 times a season. So this will get done, and it'll be great for all parties.
All right, back to basketball, and let's get to the Lakers. Apparently the team isn't content with simply pairing LeBron with Anthony Davis. According to reports, the Lakers are trying to clear up cap room to add another max player in free agency by adding more players to the AD trade. CC, do the Lakers need to add a third star in order to win a title?
No, I don't think they will. But if they want their percentages to go up, if you can clear the cap space, you want to clear the cap space regardless. If I can get a max player or not, because even if I can't get a max player, I can get another player. I can get another 2 players. So, yes, right now Los Angeles is hot. There are going to be so many guys. You have so many associations in the league. Man, you know guys will go to LA. Man, they would go there when they were losing. Now it's time to just getting ready to get turned around. Worst record in basketball, last 6 years. Now LeBron and Anthony Davis. There's so many people going to be calling the Lakers. So I don't think it's essential that they get that third guy. But if you can add Kyrie Irving, if you can add, especially another point guard, Kemba, if you can add them to the Lakers, I mean, they become, to me, the proverbial favorite as far as who's going to win the NBA. And it sets you up not only for 1 year, but you might be able to get multiple titles if you add that third star.
And the way they could do this, it is very complicated. I consider myself a bit of an amateur capologist, and I had to read this article 4
I called
times.
Nick last night, and he started talking, and I was like, listen. Okay, man, that's a little too complicated. He said, yeah, I know. I felt the same way. See, I read it 10 times. I was like, Nick, you read it 10
Man,
times?
it involves like buying second-round picks and cap holds and the over-the-cap rule, 125%. Don't worry about that. Just know it could happen. They could clear up the maximum cap space. If you can get Kyrie Irving, you do it. If you can get Kemba Walker, it's less of an instantaneous thing, but you do it. And obviously, if you can get Kawhi Leonard, you clearly do it, and you just say, we'll figure out, we'll let Alex Caruso and friends play guard for us and it won't matter. There is a very close facsimile to this in NBA history. The 2011 Miami Heat. Now, I know they didn't win the title, and they didn't win the title because the moment became too big for LeBron in the finals. But do you know who was the 4th leading scorer on that Heat team? It was Udonis Haslem. It was at 8 points per game. Their point guard that year was a ancient Mike Bibby and a young, not ready yet Mario Chalmers. They were rotating in just center off the street because they didn't have the cap flexibility. They had spent all their money on 3 guys, and they had to basically go with young, unproven guys, vet minimum guys, and guys who had already been on the roster. The Lakers would be in an even worse position in this regard. They will have no one left on the roster. In order to do this, they will have LeBron and Kyle Kuzma on the roster, Anthony Davis, max free agent X, and that is their team. To fill out their other 9 remaining roster spots, you have 1 taxpayer mid-level exception of about $5 million, and then your next, every other guy is minimum, is a veteran minimum contract or a second-round pick on a rookie minimum contract. So you would be the most top-heavy team we have seen, and you would have the least depth of any team in the league. Now, I would do it because I think they're the title favorites with LeBron and Anthony Davis. If you had LeBron and Anthony Davis, if you have the best player, the 7th best player, and call Kyrie Irving the 11th best player, now, I mean, you have so much overwhelming talent, similar to what you had that first year in Miami. But if they don't get it done, Sarah, I think the alternative is a good option as well, which is add some depth, add some defense, add some three-point shooting via 3 or 4 players in that $28-ish to $30 million you'll have to spend.
Would it give you any hesitation, though, seeing the example of this most recent finals of Golden State, how injuries affected them, Toronto having a true superstar in Kawhi, but depth was what got them to win that title. Would that give you concerns if you are the Los Angeles Lakers, not having that depth if you sign another max
Based on the way the league is, and the only way you can put these 3 stars together, Nick said, you're not going to have a whole bunch left. So that's something you have to bake into. If I go for max salary guys, it's going to be hard for me to build my bench. The way Golden State did it, they were very, very fortunate that they had guys under existing contracts so they could keep extending them. And then when they added Kevin Durant, you can't do that anymore. So there's no team going to be in that type of position. And I don't believe you need 3 stars anymore. The league is getting ready to recalibrate. Kevin Durant's getting ready to leave. So what was needed before, I don't believe we'll go back to what we thought before. The best player on the court and either an all-star, he don't have to be a superstar. They will have the ability to be able to dominate and win a championship.
And I believe this year, with everything that happened with Golden State, if you replace Steph Curry with LeBron James, the Warriors win anyway. And so unless you are worried that LeBron's going to get hurt again, if LeBron gets hurt again, then a lot of this falls apart. The pick swaps you're giving up later
LeBron gets
fall
hurt
apart.
again. You off the show.
Okay, yeah. There's a lot of things that are bad if LeBron gets hurt again. But unless we're going to expect, you can look at LeBron's injury as he went 15 years without ever being hurt, and then he got hurt. Is that a sign of things to come? Or you can look at it as the guy went to the finals 8 straight years. We saw the guys who had been to the finals 3 to 4 or 5 straight years, the type of injuries they dealt with. He tore his groin. It's a one-off. He now has time to recuperate. We'll get back to being relatively indestructible. If you believe that, Anthony Davis has proven over the last 3 years he's gotten over the injury bug. Then I don't think, listen, injuries can happen to anybody. I don't think because of fear of injury you don't sign a Kyrie Irving. With all that said, I would rather have the depth than Jimmy Butler. I would rather have the depth than Chris Middleton. I'd rather have the depth than Al Horford. Like, if you are going to use all of your cap space on one guy, it's got to be a superstar-ish level player, not an all-star-ish level player.
And you should think that the LeBron injury is a one-off based on how it happened, slipped on the court, strained his groin, tore his groin, and I think that we'll be back seeing the LeBron that we have seen before. I think that is the way that we should predict him going forward. If it was his back, if it was a knee, if it was an ankle or something that was chronic, then I would say, we should watch out.
And because we saw him come back from the injury. And while he was not at his right playing weight and his defensive effort was the lowest of his career, he was 27, 8, and 10 post-injury. So we know it's not an injury that took him into the offseason where we haven't seen him play since the injury.
And even post-injury, we should be looking for better things because that LeBron we saw sitting there with the smoked out hair, that body was not in number 23 uniform at the end of the season.
That's why he didn't have the cape on.
He wanted to show everyone.
He
wanted Chris Carter to know he's back to his regular playing weight.
Oh, no, LeBron would take his shirt off now. I've seen a lot of NBA practices. LeBron ain't got no shirt.
Welcome back to First Things First. Former NFL head coach Eric Mangini is here, looking nice and tan.
It's good to be here.
You're fresh.
Been a lot of changes since I left.
Oh, you talking about my hair?
I
Couldn't tell where he was looking.
I'm just saying there's been changes.
Coach Mangini, this is why I love him, because I can always expect honesty. I saw him in the back, and he mentioned my hair, and I said, "What do you think?" And he said, "I kind of like it. I kind of like it."
I'm getting used to it. But you have all your hair.
I have all my hair. You thought I was bald by force, not choice.
I did. And now that I see it, things are making
What are they doing?
Things are making
What
more
are they
sense.
doing behind me?
Things are making more sense.
Why are they throwing this up there? We're supposed to talk football. Coach is here.
Look at that.
Yeah.
I look different. I will admit.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know if I look better or
The guy on the left is before me. The guy on the is after
Coach, I
me.
thought you doubled as an actor. You could have sold it a little more. Let's talk Big Ben. He's the clear face of the Steelers after the team shipped off Antonio Brown to the Raiders and after Le'Veon Bell signed with the Jets. Roethlisberger admits it's been a fairly tumultuous few seasons, but he's ready to get things back on track in Pittsburgh.
Seems like a calmer, a less dramatic atmosphere in the locker room and outside as well. Is that helpful? It's a little bit calmer around Steeler country?
It's been a little crazy the last few years, maybe more so than usual that we're used to dealing with. So to kind of get back to quote-unquote normalcy is kind of nice.
Coach, can Roethlisberger and the Steelers get back to normalcy this season?
I don't know what normalcy is for Pittsburgh, because historically normalcy has been some sort of controversy, and that's the way that they've operated, and they've always operated at a very successful level, doing it that way. And there's some people and there's some teams that are like conflict diamonds. They need that stuff in order to become to realize that their potential. And I like the fact that they're in a situation where they can operate without distractions, and we should see some jumps in terms of performance if they really feel that was the reason that they weren't succeeding like they should have. But it's going to be interesting to see whether they can operate in that world and be successful, because it's not really who they've been.
Well, this is the thing, too, Coach. No one has really kind of reported on the Pittsburgh Steelers the way you have. You talk about Mike Tomlin, you talk about the dysfunction, but you talk about the success within the dysfunction. But you also love continuity. You love the fact their general manager, their head coach, and their quarterback, you believe that triangle right there is the type of things that have teams be successful. And you have seen this in the league. Sometimes your team can be a better football team. It's not basketball, but a football team with less talent because of some of those other ingredients that you like.
I'm a big believer in that. And people are able to realize their potential in those environments, because it's just like teaching or being in a classroom. If you've got one or two students that need all the attention, the teacher can't pay any attention to the other players that are trying to improve, and it just becomes counterproductive. Now, if they're talented enough, you get that. You understand that, and you deal with that to a point. But now they're in a situation where there aren't distractions, and there aren't the excuses of distractions. So now what does Mike Tomlin produce in this environment? What does Ben Roethlisberger produce in this environment? And who steps up from that other group of guys? And I'm sure there is going to be somebody, because Roethlisberger he's a force multiplier.
All right, so let's talk about Ben Roethlisberger, who you talk as glowingly about him as I hear you talk about any quarterback, maybe this side of Tom Brady. And he's deserved. He's been to 3 Super Bowls. He's won 2 of them. He has shown, even in the later stages of his career, he can be a prolific volume passer, but also early in his career game manager. And he's played through injuries. He's done it all. He's been part of the Steelers' different family dysfunction. He also speaks out differently than almost any other franchise quarterback does. He's a little more polarizing than really almost any other franchise quarterback that we have. When you hear Big Ben come out and say, return to normalcy, when you have Antonio Brown come out and talk publicly now that he's gone about the issues within that locker room, how much of responsibility for Ben Roethlisberger as the unquestioned leader on that team now is to make sure whatever potential landmines or distractions there are throughout the season do not come from him, do not come from things he says or he does that could distract a team that is going to have to win this year with less talent than it's had in the past.
Well, you make a really good point, because he has been part of that dysfunction, and he has been part of the issues that they've had. And now that those things are removed, and because he wanted those things to be removed, he has that much more responsibility to make sure that this becomes the new status quo. That the second that adversity hits, and Mike Tomlin talked about that, he said, yeah, things are great, but we haven't really faced adversity yet. When it doesn't go great against New England game 1 or Seattle game 2, or when they're on the road against San Francisco game 3.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm not predicting outcomes, but I am predicting challenging situations. Opening at New England, yeah, that's a challenging situation. Dealing with Seattle in week 2, who knows where they'll be, and then having to go to the West Coast, all those things are potential. Create potential adversity. So let's see what Ben does. Let's see what that group does. But it is absolutely his responsibility to make sure that he doesn't restart the fires.
If he takes the appropriate approach in how he conducts himself, the leader that he is, what concerns you about the talent on this team, or areas of which is on the field they need to shore up?
Well, it's going to be interesting to see what approach they take offensively, because they led the league in passing attempts last year, and getting some more balance there, seeing where the defense goes, seeing what kind of evolution that has. But I'd like to see some balance between the running game and the passing game, and allow that young defense to develop.
Yeah, and especially defensively up front. There's 2 things that match the Pittsburgh Steelers They have a tremendous amount of pass rushers that can get after the pass, after the quarterback. If I'm the Pittsburgh Steelers and Mike Tomlin, my career's on the line, my reputation's on the line. I'm getting ready to go back to the old Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm going to become an intimidating force. Even from a defensive standpoint, I'm allow them to play on the edge. Might get a couple personal fouls in as far as the secondary. I'm going to play more combination coverages. Not going to play a lot of man-to-man because they haven't been good at that. And on the offensive side, I'm totally doing a 180. I can't lead the NFL in passing. I got to lead the NFL in rushing. I got a great offensive line, got a great young running back, and Ben's going to have to swallow his pride and be able to hand the ball off and realize, get this game in the fourth quarter, and I got one of the better quarterbacks in the league. And when you have someone like Ben, they're going to win a lot of those games. So for me, if I'm the Pittsburgh Steelers, I go back to the old Pittsburgh Steelers, steal something out of there, and I go back to being physical. I go back to being intimidating. And every team in the league is going to struggle. What does Ben Roethlisberger say when they struggle? Because I know what Tom Brady's going to say. I don't know what Ben Roethlisberger, and I don't know what Aaron Rodgers. Those are the two wild cards as far as the great quarterbacks. Drew Brees, they could lose 3 in a row. I don't expect it, but I do expect him after that to have a press conference and tell us all the things that he's supposed to say compared to how Aaron Rodgers has done things and how Ben have done things.
And I don't want to hear that there's not enough talent around him. Like, to me, that cannot be part of this narrative during the course of the season. You cannot say he doesn't have enough talent. They made a conscious decision to go with the group that they went with, and now it's his job to take the talent that he has and elevate them.
And what the approach you're talking about is an approach I was highly critical of last year when a different team did it that didn't have the personnel and didn't play in the division and the weather Pittsburgh does to where it fits. What you're talking about is how Seattle did things. We're going to try. We got a great quarterback. We're not going to unleash him until the fourth. We're going to try to play great defense. We're going to run the ball a disproportionate amount of time. And as an added bonus, if things don't go right, we know our quarterback's not going to say something wild at the press conference. That's what Seattle was last year. It got them to the playoffs. I don't think they have the offensive. I know they don't have the offensive line Pittsburgh does. I know they don't have the running back Pittsburgh does. They might not have last year had the pass rushers Pittsburgh does. So Pittsburgh can take a page out of that Brian Schottenheimer playbook that annoyed me so much last season in Seattle and maybe have it be successful in Pittsburgh.
Welcome back to First Things First. Senior NBA writer Vince Goodwill joins the show. Good to see you, Vinny.
Timing couldn't be better.
I know.
It just happens to serendipitous, I guess would be the word, right?
Absolutely.
We'll call it. Well,
Welcome back, man.
Appreciate it, CC.
Vince, we're going to get right to it. Let's talk about the Rockets. According to your reports, Vince, Chris Paul has demanded a trade from Houston, and his relationship with James Harden is unsalvageable. Vince, Chris Paul and Daryl Morey have both denied this. So tell us about your report.
Well, I would expect them to deny the report considering Chris Paul's contract. Over the next, 3 years, it costs for him to make at least $40 million, basically, in average. So after the end of the season, after they lost in the second round to Golden State, and we saw how they flamed out, we expected them to perform better once Kevin Durant got hurt. And we expected them to honestly win the series. I know you did, Nick. And they flamed out in the Game 6 on their home floor. Clearly, they look disjointed. James Harden and Chris Paul have not been on the same page all season. They went weeks, I would say months, without talking. Both sides engaged in petty grievances with the other, during practices, during games, not getting along. And it sort of permeated through the rest of the team, resulting in James also saying, hey, look, it's either going to be him or it's going to be me. And Chris going to Daryl Morey and saying, hey, I don't like playing with this guy. Get me out of here.
Okay, so a number of things. First, can you elaborate on the petty grievances? Because I'm just fascinated by can you give any details on that?
Well, there are certain things during a practice or after a practice where guys are shooting free throws and they're going through their individual sort of routines after an hour and a half practice. James Harden likes to shoot by himself, all right, on the opposite basket alone. Maybe a player will join him or whatever, but it's usually his basket. Chris Paul will walk over there with one of the rookies and try to play one-on-one just to disrupt what James is doing, that type of thing, in this vein of, you should respect me because I've been in this league X amount of years. I have stripes. James Harden is like, hey, look, you should respect me. I'm an MVP at least one time over. Should be 2 or 3 times over. Mm-hmm. I'm a historical player just as much as you are.
And Harden, as hard as it is for Chris Paul to swallow, Harden has now surpassed Chris Paul's greatest individual achievements. Harden on an individual level has achieved heights that Chris Paul never has, and he's at those heights right now while Chris Paul's on the downside. You said in the beginning that, of course, that the Rockets and Chris Paul are denying it. I'm not surprised the Rockets deny it. Here's my question to you. Do you think Chris Paul has softened on his demand to be traded? Because when I saw your report, I thought it was on the board that Chris Paul either was going to say nothing or confirm it just to ensure he gets the best way to ensure you get out of town is do what Anthony Davis did, which is go on the record with the trade demand. Do you think he's softened his opinion on it? Do you think it's because he found out there wasn't a market? Why do you think, forget the Rockets, why Chris Paul is saying I never demanded a trade?
Well, I would say this. Chris Paul and Anthony Davis are in two totally different situations as far as their career trajectory.
Yes.
Anthony Davis knows that he has way more basketball in front of him than behind him. Chris Paul knows that his best days are gone. He's still an elite point guard, still a top 10 point guard, but he doesn't command the type of attention that he once did. That's a power play that Anthony Davis did. That's only a power play you can make if you're a top 5, top 6, top 7 player in the league. Chris Paul isn't there anymore. Now, can you say that his position is softened? That's tough because guys' emotions fluctuate. And when you're in the heat of a playoff series and you're frustrated because you expect to go further, then, yeah, maybe you can sort of take a step back and say, you know, what's the most logical place for me to be?
And now with Golden State breaking up, too, is it sensible for me to go back a little bit? He could be going through that right now because the NBA has changed since the time they lost to Golden State and as it is today.
Absolutely. And not just that. Daryl Morey, you have to think about it like this. He's looking at making changes to that roster. I'm sure if he could find a taker for Chris Paul, independent of the trade demand, I'm sure he would do something there. So it just adds another layer to some of the dysfunction they have going on.
And I've never seen a team in all the years that I've been watching sports, I've never seen a team fess up and say, yeah, you know something, those reports are right. You know something? We don't like each other. It comes after. We talked about Shaq. Shaq talked about even some of the things he had with Kobe, but he said there never was disrespect. And that's why I don't believe this situation, because this is the ultimate professional disrespect. When you go into a guy's space, you try to interrupt his routine, you say things that are below the belt when you're amongst each other that you know would offend one another, and that was some of the things that you had in the report. Those are the things that I have seen in locker rooms. And you know what? When the reporters come in, you know what we say? Man, we all get together and be like, nothing happened. Man, I saw a guy get knocked out. And they said, oh, man, you guys had a fight in the locker room. I didn't see it. I've been here all day. Got here early, left late. That's what we do in sports to be able to salvage that locker room and to make sure that the public doesn't make the team more dysfunctional than what typically is already there.
But with the use of the word unsalvageable with James Harden and Chris Paul's relationship, and maybe Chris Paul realizes his contract isn't one that can be moved or easily be moved. Well, how do you see James Harden's side of this and his perspective on what the team does and what happens moving forward?
Well, I think it's been done on both sides of it. James Harden is not an easy person to play with. He's not an easy person to coach. When you look at Mike D'Antoni and the system that he's catered around James Harden's talents, that's not the Mike D'Antoni system that we've seen in Phoenix and New York.
It's a combination of D'Antoni's system, James Harden fitting in the system, and James Harden working his butt off to be great at something we haven't seen anyone do.
Not just that, their teammates are frustrated with the system.
Eric Gordon was frustrated at the end of the year. That was clear.
They're surprised more than anything. The feeling that I got from the player side is they were surprised that D'Antoni allowed Harden that much freedom, that much sway in the offense. Now, if the guys, the 6, 7, 8, whoever guys, are feeling this way, imagine what a first ballot surefire Hall of Famer who's got stripes on the wall is feeling about being relegated to being a role player and then being on the floor and saying, hey, I got this second unit rolling. Keep James on the bench. Mike D'Antoni's like, look, this guy's the MVP. I got to bring him back on the floor, and if things don't go right, he's having to hear from Chris Paul. I told you not to bring him back in the game. I told you to leave me out there. So Mike D'Antoni, who's a non-confrontational person, is having to balance all these things. James Harden is not necessarily the confrontational type himself. Remember his situation with Dwight Howard a few years ago. Like, there's a lot of moving parts around this. I don't know if it's necessarily anybody's fault as much as it is people's personality traits not matching up at the right time.
And they have not put the coach in a great situation, because when the coach does not have guaranteed money, when he says something to guys, it goes in one ear and goes out the other. When you know the organization is committed, that money they're committed to, it puts an impact on the words that they say to the team. So how they have decided not to empower D'Antoni has only hurt that situation.
And I agree with that to an extent, but I'm going to defend James Harden for a moment here. Harden has earned the right to play this way. Harden has proven you can win, certainly in the regular season, playing this way. I carried this team from 11-14 to the best record after the All-Star break in the entire NBA playing this way. I averaged the second most points that have been averaged in the league in 40 years playing this way. And so I get why Harden would be a little indignant. Wait, you're saying I'm the problem? I'm not the problem. So that leads me to my question. I didn't think this at the time, but now with hindsight, I look back on it. At the end of the year, the final press conference after Game 6, Chris Paul gets dressed. He does his press conference alone and early before even the coaches, which never happens. Harden's out there at his regular time by himself. He's asked about what the Rockets need to do to get through Golden State. Now, we didn't know what was going to happen to Golden State. And James Harden said, I know exactly what we need to do this summer. I know what we need to do. Do you have any idea? Do you have a guess, or maybe you know what he was talking about?
I don't know. I can only speculate, and I think people can sort of put the pieces together now that everything has started to sort of filter out over the past couple of days. Maybe he meant, I know what we need to do. We need to get rid of this $40 million albatross of a point guard and maybe get other pieces. Now, I don't know if that's fair, because Chris Paul has been Chris Paul, and you can't expect a 33-year-old point guard to, A, turn down that money that he was being offered, and B, not be injury-prone when he was injury-prone in his prime. That was one of James Harden's issues with Chris Paul, his frustration with him being hurt, as if Chris Paul could control that. And while you say that James Harden's system, his own personal system, allows him to be successful, what about the team being successful? Well,
he kept the team afloat during the regular season.
But we're talking about the playoffs and a pursuit of a championship.
Yes.
That is something different. And I will say this, don't forget the owner's part in this. I think a lot of this instability is from the top down. And he's a new guy in a completely new situation. He doesn't come from a sports background. And I think this is a new environment, a new ecosystem that he has to adjust to. I think we're starting to see some of those words.
Just real quick before you go, it's called unsalvageable. But do they salvage it, in your opinion? Like, someone told you it was unsalvageable, but are these two guys on the Rockets to start next season, in your opinion?
You got to tell me who can take Chris Paul.
Yeah,
so they're going to have to salvage it, is what you're saying.
Or put it like this, not everybody's going to come away with a free agent this summer. A lot of teams have cap space, and there's only so many great players to go around. Maybe Chris Paul's a guy you trade into a team's cap space if they don't come home with any groceries, but I don't know how likely that is.
All right, to the Celtics. It's been a rough 24 hours for Boston. For one, Kyrie Irving is not expected to rejoin the team, and all signs seemingly point to him joining the Nets. And to make matters worse, Al Horford is also expected to turn down his player option and seek a multi-year deal elsewhere. Vince, what do you make of this Celtics situation?
Danny Ainge overplayed his hand for a very long time. He thought, okay, I can bring in Kyrie Irving and extend this sort of period of I don't have to go all in. I can leverage some of these assets, quote-unquote assets, and not look at them as players and treat them as such. And I think it wound up backfiring on him. From putting Kyrie in a leadership position without the support from an organizational standpoint, I don't think they supported him and gave him people to connect with to show him how to be a leader. They just thought that some of that LeBron magic would wear off on him, and it did not. And now you have all these disgruntled young players, and you have a veteran in Al Horford who's like, you know what? I got X amount of years left. I'm in my early 30s. I'm not going to take a hometown discount for a team that's not going to compete for a championship if we're being realistic. I better take this money while I can. He's had injury histories over the past 3 or 4 years. And when we find out where he goes, that's going to say a lot about what the Celtics are as an organization.
And emotionally, we didn't talk much about it, but this season had to be harder on Al Horford than anybody on that team. Al Horford was, as you mentioned earlier, a two-time champion at the University of Florida. Won a championship, and then he and that whole crew, Joe Kim Noah, Corey Brewer, said, you know what, we're going to come back and try to do it again, and they did it. And he got to the NBA and was an excellent player, was on a 60-win Atlanta team, maybe the best player on that Atlanta team, and ran into LeBron, and then got to Boston and ran into LeBron. And then last year, LeBron's gone. Kyrie's healthy. Hayward's back. And this is the year I, Al Horford, make my first NBA Finals. And what? We're the 4th or 5th best team in the conference all year long. We win our first 5 playoff games and then fall flat on our face. It couldn't have left a worse taste in anyone's mouth other than Horford. So it makes sense that he would leave, especially with Mark Stein's report. Someone's getting ready to offer him 4 years, $100 million. But on the Danny Ainge point, it's amazing to me, the guy that played in the 80s, has been around this league for the entirety of my life, that he doesn't know something that is so obvious to everyone else. To make the NBA Finals, to win a championship, you have to have not an all-star, not a nice team, not a good supporting cast, superstars. Magic, Bird, Isaiah, Jordan, Akeem, Shaq, Duncan, Kobe, LeBron, Steph. Those 10 guys, at least one of them, has been in 40 consecutive NBA Finals. You got one of those guys? Okay, if not, you're drawn dead. And the problem for them, and the reason why Danny Ainge should be criticized, is, unlike many teams, they had so many bites at the apple at getting a guy like that. You could have traded for Kawhi. Mm-hmm. You could have traded for Anthony Davis. You could have traded for Paul George. You could have traded for Blake Griffin. You could have traded for Boogie Cousins. You could have. Instead, Terry Rozier was untouchable, and then Jaylen Brown's untouchable, and now, of course, Jason Tatum's untouchable. And those 3 players combined all set their career All-Star games at 2.5 and take the under. So, okay, that's your plan moving forward, which is not a plan moving forward.
Wasn't it reported last week Danny Ainge had an opportunity to trade for Kawhi Leonard?
Yeah.
But he wouldn't include who?
Jaylen Brown. Yeah.
You know what ends up happening? Danny Ainge, he played himself. Mm-hmm. You know? That's what they say on the street. You straight played yourself. In believing that Kyrie Irving, even though he demanded a trade out of Cleveland, Boston wasn't one of the teams he demanded to go to. So Danny Ainge and the organization just said, you know, if we bring him here in our culture, we can win him over. We're going to go out and get Gordon Hayward. We already got Al Horford. We got some young players. Like, this is a championship atmosphere. Kyrie Irving's getting ready to go out the door. Al Horford's going out the door with no compensation. So regardless of what they say, those 2 veteran players, one with championship experience, Al Horford, a world-class guy and has championship experience in college, they're going out saying, hey, other free agents, don't come to Boston. That's what they're saying. So the message, man, the Boston, they're going to have a perception problem around the league, because if they don't draft you, who's going to come to Boston? And I'm just going to go on history. I've been live enough, Nick, longer than yourself. Not a whole bunch of great basketball players are signing up to go play for the Boston Celtics. That has been consistent decade after decade.
Yeah, they got Gordon Hayward. Go back to that overflowing well of max-level players who played for Brad Stevens in college and get another one. Oh, wait, they don't exist. They got Al Horford in a weak free agency year, and he left at his first opportunity. Not picking up my option, and I am gone. Like, their only path was to take the bounty they got from Brooklyn and turn it into stars. Because the other sneaky truth about the Celtics is, haven't drafted great. Drafted well, and I will give them credit. Jason Tatum, they saw they had the number 1 pick. They could move back and still get the player they wanted.
Move.
It was a great move. And individually, Danny Ainge always wins the transaction.
Absolutely.
Always wins the transaction.
Absolutely.
But if you are only going to bet on 80-20 favorites, you're never going to win big. And that's been the problem for them, is sometimes you have to run the risk, I might lose this transaction. I might trade Jaylen Brown for Kawhi Leonard. Jaylen Brown blossoms into his best possible potential. Kawhi doesn't get healthy, and he walks. Or maybe you pair Kawhi and Kyrie and you win the title.
Yeah, look at the risk that Golden State took. 73 wins. We're getting ready to go sign Durant with Draymond, that explosive. Steph might be offended, and Klay, man, who knows what Klay is thinking. But that was a chance that they took. Kawhi last year, man, they cashed it all in. Right now in the NBA, it's hard to win if you don't take a chance.
Well, scared money don't make money is what they say. And the problem with Danny is with getting Garnett and Allen, it was a blue block special, basically. He got that deal from Kevin McHale, his buddy in Boston.
Homie hookup.
The hookup. Jeff Green for Ray Allen, boom, you win that trade. And then with the Brooklyn trade, you win that resoundingly. As soon as it happened, everybody could say, you know what, Boston made out like bandits. The problem is you feel like you have to come away with that type of advantage every single time, and you believe that you are smarter than everybody else all the time, and that, you know what, not only would my players be able to play because they're playing for their contracts, they're playing for their futures, that it won't hamper them or affect them, that also I'll be able to get the maximum value for the perfect superstar at the right time. And Danny Ainge, actually, like you said, he played himself. And here's the other part of it. I'm not sure if Danny Ainge has the right people as far as around him, executives and in the coaching staff that can connect with today's players. When you can connect with Kevin Garnett easy because he wants to win. He's one-track minded. You can connect with veterans 10, 11, 12 years in that are desperate to win, that don't have a lot of frills. But to connect with a guy like Kyrie Irving, who's a little bit more difficult, who's a little bit more nuanced, who's a little bit more flighty, you need different types of people on your coaching staff that he can connect with. And that was something that I've been long hearing, that Kyrie didn't feel like he had any connection with anybody in that Boston Celtics organization.
And 6 years after that Nets heist, the Nets in about 2 weeks will be in far better position than the Boston Celtics are. And the one piece that they traded for that of their Nets bounty was for Kyrie Irving, who now almost assuredly is going to go play for the Nets and not the Celtics.
Hey, if you could have any player in the NBA or Brad Stevens, who would you have?
Oh, I remember that question. My man Chris Mannix put that up on Twitter.
I just had the
Why
best.
you got to roast Mannix like that? He ain't here to defend himself.
Vince, we're going to see you a little later in the show. On to the Lakers. Apparently, the team isn't content with simply pairing LeBron with Anthony Davis. According to reports, the Lakers are trying to clear up cap room to add another max player in free agency by adding more players to the AD trade. However, this depends on GM Rob Pelinka recruiting talent to Los Angeles. CC, do you trust Pelinka to build around Anthony Davis and LeBron?
This is the thing. I wasn't inside the Lakers' chaos, but I'm going to do this. I'm going to give Rob Pelinka the opportunity to have a clean slate, as if I didn't know anything. Magic quit, whatever's going on with him. I can't continue go on with the Jenny bus, because I've known about Jenny bus since I was a kid. My brother was drafted by the Lakers. I know the famous father. There's no way I expect her to live up to the expectation of the dad, but who could? But at some point, I got to get a level set and be like, what do I believe in? This was my team growing up. So I'm going to give Rob Pelinka a chance. He got the Anthony Davis trade done, something that the last regime couldn't do. Now, according to the free agency, I believe that they have enough quality people around there to understand what they have. They saw what happened in Golden State. You realize right now it's getting ready to break up. You don't need 3 stars. Man, let's go out and get some players different than the players we got last year trying to get playmakers. Let's get some guys who can distribute the basketball, shoot it, especially guards. We need some guard help immediately. Let's not be consumed with trying to get that max player. And I do believe that they can get it done because this is not that difficult. LeBron's done this a couple times in Miami. That first year, that roster, they didn't have the flexibility.
4th leading scorer was Udonis Haslem.
Yeah, they didn't have the flexibility. When he got to Cleveland, people could also see the LeBron train was on a runaway. Hey, man, I'll go there for less. So he started getting players to build it. And right now, I believe that players see in year 17, LeBron's going to win him a chip in the next 2 years, and they're going to try to be in L.A. and willing to sacrifice the resources to be on that basketball team.
And since you extended that courtesy to Rob Pelinka, Rob's going to set you up with a dinner with Heath Ledger to pay back the courtesy. So I cannot assign the same level of confidence to Rob Pelinka.
I'm not giving him confidence.
But you're giving him a clean
that.
slate. You're not going to hold the previous moves against him.
What else are we going to do?
That's fair. No, that's fair. But if the Lakers get a max guy, it will take some very interesting, fancy cap mechanics. And that does take some savvy. That takes some savvy on knowing the CBA, understanding the order of operations you have to do, so someone in the front office will really know what they're doing if they're able to do it. But the recruiting will be the power of LeBron and Anthony Davis. If they get Kyrie, he's buddies with Anthony Davis. He and LeBron reconciled, and Kyrie will be saying, I want to do what I know works. If they get Kemba, it will be because Kemba Walker understandably is like, man, I've been the best player on every team I've ever been on. Since I left UConn, we haven't been able to compete for anything other than a 7 seed. I've been breaking my head against the wall to try to get to 42 wins. Let me go make my life easier, compete deep into the playoffs, and see what that's like.
Yeah, the greatest basketball player, Michael Jordan, couldn't do it for me, so the second greatest in LeBron James will be able to get him a championship.
Or maybe Michael will go into the luxury tax for the first time in the history of his ownership and actually keep Kemba Walker, but that's neither here nor there. So those are the obvious moves. Where I have trepidation is if one of those obvious moves does not come through, because a lot of the smart people I read on the internet, a lot of the analytics people, a lot of the really good minds writing about basketball have made the case this week that the Lakers are actually better off with players A, B, C, depth, shooting, defense, than another superstar. And I can listen to that argument. The concern is if you don't get the superstar, will Lakers management be able to execute players A, B, C, or are you going to get Z, Y, X, and it's Lance Stevenson 2.0, JaVale McGee 2.0, and that disaster? So if you were to tell me, behind door number 1 is Kyrie Irving, behind door number 2 is Kemba Walker, and behind door number 3 is Terrence Ross, Darren Collison, and Patrick Beverley, I'm interested in all 3 doors. But if you're telling me door 1 is Kyrie, door 2 is Kemba, door 3 is Boogie Cousins on a bit of an overpay, and guys
Jimmy Butler.
Jimmy Butler I don't think they could get, but guys that don't fit as well, then I have a little more trepidation. And so this is where Rob Pelinka can prove Magic was the problem. The problem wasn't me. I was screaming from the mountaintops, we need shooting, and Magic was saying, nope, I watched the finals, and you know what, those Golden State Warriors don't shoot threes. I don't know what he was watching, but whatever it was. And so it is, I have more faith in Rob Pelinka than I did 2 weeks ago, but not enough faith right now to say if they strike out on the obvious, and I left out Kawhi. Kawhi's obviously an obvious. If they strike out on one of those guys, are you going to be able to use the $28 to $30-ish million you have effectively for this year and the next year and the year after that?
Does it change the dynamic? Because you mentioned last season and some of the questionable signings of those role players. It didn't fit the mold of how LeBron typically played. They did not surround him with shooters. You now are not only heading into a season where you need to fill up the roster, but also you've got a new coach with an entirely new staff. See, how does the approach for Pelinka change? How does all of this, if you strike out on the obvious choices and you're feeling some of these complementary roles, how much does the style of play, the personnel, how much does Pelinka need to weigh into that factor of the type of personnel that they actually need to help LeBron and AD thrive?
Well, I believe it comes very important, the communication. Sitting down with Frank Vogel, sitting down with LeBron, sitting down once the AD trade is sitting down with them and saying, man, what are we going to do? So at least we can go forward on the same page. I know that LeBron, last year, him and Magic, they went forward on the same page. I'm not saying that he said we need Rondo, Lance Stevenson, but he signed off on them. And the only way you can be able to win, being right or being wrong, is everyone being on the same page, how we're going to play, how they're going to utilize LeBron and AD, and what does the bench look like. I believe that this offseason and training camp for LeBron, I believe this is the most important training camp for him, coming off that injury and having all these new pieces added to the team.
When my pal Daryl Morey was talking to anyone who would listen yesterday, saying that things with Houston are just fine, one of the things he said was he was on a group FaceTime with Harden and Chris Paul recently. That part was relevant to his side of things. To the Lakers side of things, what were they doing on a group FaceTime? Daryl said they were discussing 50 potential free agents, gauging their interest on how they could play with those guys. That is what Rob Pelinka and LeBron need to be doing right now. Okay, if we get Kyrie, Kawhi, or Kemba, great. If we don't, here's a player, here's a player, here's a player, here's what we think we could get these 3 players. Would these guys work? Okay, is that better than this? You need, because you can't do it with Anthony Davis yet. You do it with LeBron. You have Vogel involved as well. That's what needs to be happening as we speak in Los Angeles.
91 is your destination for the day's best sports shows. Tune in for the biggest personalities on the biggest stories. Of course, we get you started right here on First Things First. You can catch it all Monday through Friday on FS1. We're talking Aaron Rodgers with Coach Mangini. Apparently, there is already tension between Aaron Rodgers and his new head coach, Matt LaFleur. Rodgers seems frustrated that LaFleur's offense doesn't give him freedom at the line of scrimmage, saying, I don't think you want to ask me to turn off 11 years. It's just the other stuff that really not many people in this league can do. That's not like a humble brag or anything. That's just a fact. There aren't many people that can do at the line of scrimmage what I've done over the years. LaFleur added, this is Aaron Rodgers. He's had a lot of freedom to make those calls, and deservedly so. Now, how do we reconcile that and get to a place where we put him in the best position to succeed? Coach, what do you make of the dynamic between Aaron Rodgers and his new head coach?
This is one of the best jobs you could get as a new head coach, and it's one of the worst jobs you get as a new head coach, especially if you're an offensive coordinator. It's one of the best jobs because you can win right away. You can win every year. You've got arguably the most talented player in the NFL as your quarterback, but it's one of the hardest jobs because he's going to check you every single step of the way, and he's going to challenge you every single step of the way, and you're on his side of the ball, so there's going to constantly be that give and take. And we know with Aaron, he's not afraid to put anybody on blast, and it's an issue, especially as a first-time head coach. Now, I do think that LaFleur's got to put in his system, but there's got to be an element of recognizing what Aaron Rodgers can do and how Aaron Rodgers can do things that other people can't, and build that stuff in, and not just blindly put in your system without allocating, some space for how special he is.
Later in my career, I had a lot of very good wide receivers, coaches, from the time I had 5 years on until I got out of the league. And later in my career, I ended up getting a guy named Charlie Baggett. I don't mind mentioning Charlie's name among some of the other great receiver coaches that I had. But Charlie was so wise, a former football player, played at Michigan State, played quarterback, understood reading, and understood that I was a special player. He sat me down the first day, and he said, I've made up my mind. I'm not going to teach you one thing about football. I'm not going to teach you one thing about running routes, not one thing. But I am going to teach you about how you can be a better leader, how you can lead this team, how you can lead this locker room, how there's certain coverages and everything that I understand. I might not understand them as well as you, but I understand them as well as anyone. So we started off with great. He said also, I'm never going to say anything in front of your peers to embarrass you or make you look bad, but I am going to coach you hard every single day. And him and I, man, we had a great time going about, man, continuing to break records, and it opened up my mind to, what's this guy keeping from me? So it made me more of a sponge to what he did know compared to me showering him with information. Oh, I'm going to turn off. I'm going to turn off 8 straight Pro Bowls. Oh, I'm going to turn off breaking the NFL record. So him and I had a great relationship, and it's how you approach things. Aaron Rodgers is right in a certain respect. You can't play football series after series making adjustments on the sideline. You have to have a number of plays that at any time, no matter what defense they call, I can call on them right now. There's defenses, there's so many exotic blitzes, there's so many exotic looks that I can't go out there with just 2 plays. Man, you're not playing the way Drew Brees plays. You're not playing the way Tom Brady plays. You're not playing the football the way the best in the game play it. And Matt LaFleur, you're right, he's got a great opportunity. But he's going to realize the longer he coaches, there's some guys in this league that can do things that you can't coach. You don't know anything about it, and you're not going to have the experience unless you've seen these special players. And me, I played with 7 other Hall of Famers. And each one of those guys was special in their own right.
And I think tell me if you disagree with this. I think it's easier for coaches to recognize. When we talked about this yesterday, you talked about how when Randy got there, in relatively short order, there were certain things run or done for Randy that had never been done for other receivers because he's 6'5 and a half. He can jump higher than anybody. He's faster than everybody. Everyone can see that. When you guys played against Lawrence Taylor, he's so physically dominating that you see it on film. Anyone can see it, so you adjust things accordingly. If he's on your team, if he's your opponent.
We double-team Lawrence Taylor every play, Coach, even when we ran away. Buddy Ryan, the first on that Monday, we're playing the New York Football Giants, and that guy, because he's special, is not going to beat us.
And so the point, when someone's 4'2", 40 for Randy, is their ability to process information. It can be harder to instantly recognize I have to implement something special for them. It's something that I have seen happen in the reverse when offensive coordinators leave New England and they look at their quarterback. Charlie Weiss gets to Kansas City with Matt Castle, and he's like, well, Matt's got a lot of the same measurables as Tom. He was in the same system. I'll ask him to do those same things. What Aaron Rodgers wants to do at the line of scrimmage, I'll ask him to do those same things. And Matt Castle, with no disrespect to him, can't do it because Tom Brady's 4'2", 40 is his brain. And so we know Aaron Rodgers can make all these great throws, but he's also special because of his ability to process the information. And what the potential conflict here is, if people don't know, Matt LaFleur came up under Kyle Shanahan and Gary Kubiak in a style of offense where you go to the line, you have two available calls, you look at the defense, you call one of those two plays, and then there's so much pre-snap motion and movement. If you want to get out of it at the end, you don't really have the time or the flexibility. Rodgers wants the time. So I think it's encouraging. They're both on the record about this. It's not sources say. They both talked to Mike Silver. They know this could potentially be a problem that they need to work through together. And they both have to bend a little bit, I would imagine. Rodgers has to acquiesce somewhat to what LaFleur wants to do. And LaFleur has to recognize Rodgers' super processor is his brain and allow that to thrive where it can.
When Rodney Harrison first got to the Patriots, it was maybe 2 or 3 weeks in, and he was supposed to hit a landmark on a coverage, and he didn't drop that deep, and he didn't drop that wide, and he ended up breaking on the middle read. And I said, what are you doing? You're supposed to hit your landmark. He said, well, I read it based off the release. I'm like, okay. And that's how he was able to do things that other guys weren't. So I was gonna adjust the way that I coached specific things because of his feedback and that give and take. Now, the point that Cris made, I thought was an excellent point. He wasn't turning off who Cris was, but he wanted to work with his coach to figure out how to get better. And that, to me, is what distinguishes great players. It's not that they you're trying to take away what they do in a great fashion. You do really well, but they're willing to keep learning. And Rodgers has to be willing to keep learning in order for him to improve.
We are back here with Vincent Goodwill, and we are going viral. On Monday, the Raptors celebrated their first championship in team history, but they wouldn't have made it to this moment without Kawhi hitting the only series-clinching shot in NBA history. Now, take a look at the guy who was behind Kawhi, Jordan Lloyd, on the right. At the Raptors parade, he wore a T-shirt that said, random guy in a suit.
So people know he's the guy from the picture.
That's amazing.
Standing behind Kawhi, guy on a two-way contract. That's awesome.
Amazing.
That is.
Well, he'll never, ever forget that moment right there.
That's great. And that parade was Canada did the parade right, man. I know there was a little skirmish. I'm not worried about that. There's that many people.
Just a little gunfire. We're used to that.
Listen, man, you get 2 million people together, you're going to have some gunfire. Come on.
All right, let's talk about the Rockets. According to your report, Vince, Chris Paul has demanded a trade from Houston, and his relationship with James Harden is unsalvageable. Vince, with the Warriors in flux and the Lakers far from a finished product, are the Rockets blowing a chance to win the West with this discord?
Blowing a chance would be actually doing something and doing something damaging. I'm not sure they have the roster or the style of play that can win in the West. And Nick, I know we go back and forth on this. I just don't know if James Harden's style is conducive to playoff basketball. I think you need more people who are capable of making plays, and during the regular season, you need to build better habits. But just from a talent standpoint and a where this team has been standpoint, yeah, they're blowing the chance because we don't know what the Lakers are going to do. I don't know if I can trust Rob Pelinka to build a championship team, even though they've been gifted Anthony Davis, even though they've been gifted LeBron James. We don't know what Portland is going to do. They could have maxed out. Golden State, we know what their issues are. This is a golden opportunity for the Rockets, even despite the turmoil that they have. Championships are often won amidst turmoil. The Lakers, we've seen that. The Bulls, we've seen that. So all these things that are happening, the reports that have come out, what I've written, that doesn't affect anything necessarily on the floor, what can happen next season, 82 games in the playoff run, if they choose to put all that stuff aside and put it together.
If they decide to break up this team, to me, I'm a little bit different than you because I think that they've already blown an opportunity. That being when they had the best record, when they had home court, when they had the Warriors without Kevin Durant. So for me, I'm not going to say they blew 2 opportunities, but let's just combine them. They had a great opportunity. We didn't know Toronto was going to come out the East. They could have defeated Toronto with that style, and then we wouldn't be having that debate as far as James Harden, the coach, will that style win? But to me, they've blown at least one opportunity given the way the league's changed. Just take a snapshot. 8 weeks ago, today, the league is totally different. And as you mentioned, we don't know. Did Portland max out? We don't know Denver. They lost to game number 7 at home. They can't say they got a bunch of confidence, a bunch of young players. We don't know where they're going to go. They need to try to come back. The best Houston team is probably the team that we saw, that because now Capella got better, because Golden State's not going to have the Hampton Five to deem him unplayable at a lot of times. So I believe this would be a big mistake in breaking this team up, because you're not going to get something for Chris Paul's contract. That contract is ugly. Right now, who would you rather have, Chris Paul or John Wall? You take Chris Paul by a little, because
Chris Paul's more valuable to Houston than anyone else because their window is still open, and their window is right now. And I disagree with your premise, and because I think your premise is flawed, because we saw this team not only be up 3-2 on the Warriors in the Western Conference Finals, but we saw them be up 15 points in a Game 7 at home. If you were going to say, because they didn't win that game, because they didn't win that series, they can't win a championship, that is like saying the Buffalo Bills couldn't win a Super Bowl because Scott Norwood missed a field goal. Everything is the same if he makes that field goal. Nothing about them systemically is different.
This is not coming down to a field goal, Nick. When you look at the way that the Houston Rockets have systematically, late in games, they have broke down.
Against only this one team, and that team is gone now.
Insert team here. When the pressure happens, James Harden does not play well late in games. Did he play well in the fourth quarter of that Game 6? At home, whether it's against Golden State or anybody else, you have an opportunity to win, minus Kevin Durant. So you can't say a more talented team. You can't say a team that was more well put together. They built that team to beat Golden State.
But the fourth quarter of Game 5, he did, and it was Chris Paul that was 3 of 14 in that game. Listen, is James Harden as good in the postseason or the regular season? No. Is that a fair indictment? Yes. Does his style work better over the course of 3 different teams in a week than 3 games against one team in a week? Yes. Does that mean they're drawing dead to win a title? Absolutely not. And what the Rockets have going for them, if they can weather this storm, is all 5 starters under contract. They will have the taxpayer exception to spend. Unlike last year, they will go into the tax this season.
Do you believe that they will go into the tax? I don't believe that they will.
I would bet any amount of money I have they will go into the tax this season. The point was to avoid the repeater tax in 3 straight years. Once you ducked it last year, you now can go into the tax at will this year and next year and be fine. So the Rockets should go into next season right behind the Lakers, in my opinion, as the secondary favorites in the West.
Well, the only way they can be the second favorite is you don't believe what he reported.
Well,
if you don't believe that Chris Paul hates him, because it's hard to come back from hate.
Well, I don't listen. I think I don't think the relationship is worse now than it was at the tail end of last season. And last season they were right there. So I think you can be professional and you can work together.
But now that we got all this information, were they really right there? Because the team wasn't that close.
Does it come back to the style? Like, you bring up the style, and obviously this is not Mike D'Antoni's style. It's predicated on the incredible efficiency of James Harden in isolation. So that's why they have been playing the style. The question keeps circling back to, can it work in the postseason? Do they change? Is that part of salvaging this relationship to lean more towards what Chris Paul has been asking for? And can you actually take this team and make them as successful with changing the style and mitigating some of what James Harden does on a nightly basis.
I think it's hard to ask a player like James Harden, who's had so much success being this way, to change the way that you're playing.
Right.
30-point streaks, an MVP, maybe a second MVP this year, depending on how the voting turns out. You're asking an MVP to not be an MVP. And here's the thing we are discounting. No Jeff Delic is coming back. They were last in defense before they brought him back. He's not coming back this time around. You have to be able to fix that defense, Nick, moving forward. And Mike D'Antoni single-handedly does not seem equipped to be able to do that.
But they're not going to leave that coaching spot vacant. They will hire someone that they obviously believe can do that.
What power does he have to do that? Because their offensive system, they don't practice a lot. So there's a number of other things. It's hard to put in a great defensive system when your system is we're not going to practice a lot.
And then here's the thing, Nick. There are great teams who have small, minute championship windows that just don't get it done. The Sacramento Kings, the Phoenix Suns of Charles Barkley and Kevin Johnson. It's no indictment. Sometimes you just come along at the wrong time.
Right, and there are great teams that would win championships, could win championships, but can't get past the greater team. The day after the Rockets season ended, I sat right here on the show and said they will never beat the Warriors. Doesn't matter what they do. Doesn't matter. They are drawing dead against this team. It is not only a talent, it seemed to be a mental block that shows up against the Warriors. The Warriors are gone now. And so just like the Raptors could not get past LeBron.
The Warriors were gone when Kevin Durant got hurt.
No, they weren't, man. That was the same team. Steph and Clay were the team that had beaten the Rockets the 2 years before KD got there. They were the team that beat the Rockets in the Western Conference Finals in 2015. The team that beat the Rockets in the first round in 2016. The team that beat the Rockets in 2018 with Kevin Durant. Now that the Warriors are a different team, to act like the Rockets have to do some major overhaul in order to be right there, I do not agree with.
If Chris Paul had a more favorable contract, would you be saying trade him?
Of course.
Oh, okay. So
I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm just not saying they're drawing dead. I would try to trade Chris Paul as is. But I wanted the Cavs to trade Kevin Love because I did not think he was in a good situation for what they're trying to do. It didn't mean if you don't trade Kevin Love, you're drawing dead for a title. These are different discussions.
So, Nick, you told me that they have a mental block against the Golden State Warriors, right?
Yes.
So if they're playing in late May against who you claim to be the greatest player ever, there would not be a mental block there?
You wouldn't have the history of repeated failure. I'm not saying...
Yes or no, Nick?
A mental block?
Yes or no,
No,
Nick?
you can't have a mental block in someone who's never beaten you. But I'm not saying I would pick them to win the title. But who are the list of teams that can win the title next year? Are the Rockets on it?
Nick, we haven't gone through July 1st yet. Half of the league is up for free agency.
Okay,
That's
there
way
we go.
Too early
Exactly.
To say.
I actually did ask you a yes or no question like you did me. I didn't hear an answer. They're not. Okay.
You're not going to trap me there again.
Hey, I tell you guys, it's not a debate show.
I know.
All right?
Vinny, thank you for being here. Great suit.
Thank you for listening to the First Things First podcast. Remember, leave us a review and tell us what you think. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts and catch us on FS1 Monday through Friday, 6:30 a.m. Eastern. For Chris Carter and Nick Wright, I'm Jenna Wolfe. So long, everybody.